last night hurt as a Browns fan. Prayers up to Nick Chubb. He went down with a very gruesome injury. I'm hoping for a speedy recovery as he's the heart and soul of this city and this ball club. But on today, on a positive note, we're here today to close off of Week 2 for the NFL season. We're going to hand out some Week 2 NFL awards. We're going to update my top 10 teams here in the NFL and much, much more. So if you like sports podcasts, if you like sports talk in general, I promise you, this is going to be the channel for you as we've been dropping consistent, high-quality content, 4 videos a week for about a year now. So if you enjoyed any point, all we ask for is that you support us down below on the road to 1,000 subs. As without further ado, this is the Anomaly Podcast. It's Owen. Let's start off with some Week 2 players of the week. Starting off here, my offensive player of the week is going to be none other than the $40+ million man, Daniel Jones. Of course, I just mentioned, this is a guy that got a big payday in the offseason, comes into this year, week 1, he gets blown out 40-0, as of course Dallas, give them their credit, but Daniel Jones and the Giants did not look good. So on top of that, coming into week 2, they're down 20-0 against the Arizona Cardinals, a team that doesn't even want to win football games. But then in that second half, something switched. And Daniel Jones, this is a guy that put up 380 total yards, 3 touchdowns. He led the Giants to their biggest comeback win since 1949, which is absolutely insane. And of course, if you believe the Giants have Super Bowl aspirations, they avoided that 0-2 dreadful start that really hinders your chances of a Super Bowl title. But for Daniel Jones, shout out to him. Something, again, flipped in that second half, and he looked like a completely different player. This is a Giants team that was outscored 60-0 at one point in the season after 6 quarters. But again, they turned that switch. They look like the Giants team that we expected them to look like, and it was all led by Daniel Jones. So shout out to him. He takes home my Week 2 player of the week, at least on the offensive side of the ball. Some honorable mentions here for our players of the week offensively. I'm going to start here with the Eagles offensive line. I know in the media we refuse to give the offensive line credit, but the Eagles are responsible for 450+ yards offensively and 4 total touchdowns, 3 of those coming on the ground. So shout out to the Eagles offensive line, as again, they don't always get the love that they deserve. Even though on the losing end of things, I'm going to give Josh Dobbs a honorable mention nod, as he was thrown into this offense on a team that isn't supposed to win a lot of games. And at least for the first 3 quarters, this Cardinals team looked like a pretty good team. Shout out to Josh Dobbs, as 270 yards, 2 touchdowns is nothing to shy away from. It's nothing to look away at. Shout out to Josh Dobbs there, as he had a pretty good individual outing there in Arizona. Mike Evans is another guy I want to highlight. 6 receptions, 170+ yards, a touchdown, making Baker Mayfield look like an NFL quarterback. Of course, that's jokes. I love Baker Mayfield. But Mike Evans, pretty solid week there. And then Nico Collins, the guy that flies under the radar. He's not going to get a lot of media attention, but one of the most underrated wideouts in the league. 7 catches, 150 yards, and a touchdown. Shout out to these 4, as well, I guess these 3 in the Eagles offensive line, as those are guys that were very close to winning this award as well. Shout out to those guys. The defensive player of the week, I'm going to give to Micah Parsons, and I hate to start the season with back-to-back winners, but in my defense, I gave the Week 1 defensive player of the week to the entire Dallas Cowboys team, as they of course had that 40-0 blowout. But this week it's solely in the possession of Micah Parsons, one of the most talented defensive players in the league, and might be the best defensive player in the league. It's hard to go against the leader of a unit that has only allowed 10 points throughout the first 2 weeks of the season, which they're the only team that can say that. And it really looks like it could be an historical unit. I mean, Micah Parsons himself had 2 sacks, 2 hurries, 2 quarterback hits. He had a career-high Pro Football Focus grade of 94.4. And of course, like I mentioned, the defense as a unit has been dominant. He's the leader of that. And because of that, and all of the things that I've mentioned, Micah Parsons will take home my Week 2 Defensive Player of the Week. Some honorable mentions on the defensive side of the ball. We have guys like Chris Jones in his return to football this year, as he was the number 1 rated interior defensive line per PFF, and he had a sack and a half. He should have had 2 sacks, but Chris Jones still a pretty good effort. Nick Bosa was the number 1 rated edge this week, as he had a pretty good outing in its own right. Christian Gonzalez, the rookie there for New England, cornerback of course, as 6 tackles, an interception, the first interception of his young rookie career, so shout out to Christian Gonzalez. He was not my first rated corner out the draft, I will admit, but I was wrong, as Christian Gonzalez has looked really, really good here in his early career. And then Jake Moody, again, the kickers don't get a lot of love, but 3 for 3 on field goals, 57, he had a 57-yarder, which was his long for the week, 12 total points for the San Francisco team as they got off to a 2-0 start there against the Los Angeles Rams. So those are the players of the week. I was very close to having that Cincinnati returner, but that wasn't a losing effort. Regardless, those are the players of the week and some honorable mentions. Let's get into my updated top 10 teams in the NFL. So of course, if you go to last Tuesday's video, you can see my preseason rankings. But in this video here, you see my pre-week 2 rankings. So this is from last Tuesday's video. As you see my top 10, it goes as follows. We have San Francisco, Philly, Kansas City, Miami, and Cincy in my top 5. 6 through 10 is Jacksonville, Dallas, Detroit, the Chargers, and the Cleveland Browns. We have a lot of shakeups this week, and we have to expect that early in the year, as some teams might not be what we expected them to be prior to the season. But here we go. At the number 10 spot, first off, I'm going to say this as you see and you ponder why I have this team at number 10. But some teams that dropped out of these rankings are the Cincinnati Bengals, the Los Angeles Chargers, and the Cleveland Browns. The Browns, of course, if they won, I think if they had Nick Chubb, they would win and they would still be in these rankings. They dropped out, though. The Chargers and the Bengals, I just can't have an 0-2 team in my top 10 rankings. And I think definitely if they get back on the right track, there's not a problem. They are going to shoot back into these top 10 rankings, but for now, they're 0-2 and they don't deserve a top 10 nod. Some teams that are right outside are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, surprisingly, the New Orleans Saints, and the Atlanta Falcons. 3 NFC South teams there. All of those teams might be better than my number 10 selection in the Washington Commanders, but I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to say that the Commanders are a top 10 team, so I'm going to show some love to the Washington Commanders. This is a team that, in the first 2 weeks, has surprised many as they're 2-0 to start, right? But they have the best defensive line in football. We knew that. But the biggest thing here is Sam Howell and how the offense has looked improved under Eric Bieniemy. As Eric Bieniemy, we knew he was one of the best offensive coordinators, but you never could give him too much credit because he did have Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, and Pat Mahomes at his disposal for the majority of his time there in Kansas City. But now he's in Washington. He's taken a gamble to finally get to a head coaching nod, and he's doing wonders here with Sam Howell. Sam Howell has looked amazing in his first 2 weeks. This offense has looked better as an overall unit. Brian Robinson had a really good week last week, so this team just as a unit has looked better. And defensively, I mean, Emmanuel Forbes, the rookie there, he's shown some promise. Of course, this defensive line looks good, and Chase Young, even though he had a couple bonehead penalties there last week, he looked pretty good at moments. So this defensive line is fully intact. They have some promising young secondary pieces, and offensively, they look better than ever, at least since they have in the last couple of years. So shout out to the Commanders. They're 2-0. Again, I think there's other teams better than them, but I don't know how much longer I'll be able to say that they're a top 10 team. So shout out to the Commanders for grabbing a top 10 spot, debuting on this list most importantly. The Buffalo Bills are returning to this list as they were in my preseason top 10 at number 10, and now they're here at number 9. As, look, they had a rough week 1 as they turned the ball over a lot. They couldn't beat an Aaron Rodgers-less Jets team on Monday night, but then they returned in week 2 in a big way against a much lesser Raiders team, But they did put up like 38 points. Their defense looked good. Josh Allen protected the ball a lot more this week. James Cook had his moments. This team just overall looked like the Bills team that we've known for years and years. And they returned to my top 10 rankings here at my number 9 spot. So shout out to Josh Allen for getting back on the right track. Can they keep it going is the question. And at number 8, they are going to stay stagnant despite a loss. But I'm going to go with the Detroit Lions And again, I know they lost, but they did lose in the most competitive game of the week against the Seattle Seahawks. A very high-scoring game. The Lions just didn't have some stuff go their way there at the end of the game. But I think 8 is a fair spot here in Week 2, as, again, they are 1-1, but there's not 8 other teams that are better than them at this moment. They should get back on track in Week 3. At number 7, not Week 7, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I did this solely for the fact that I didn't think it's going to be hard to justify that this team just lost their biggest game of the year and then that they stay at number 6, which is where I had them last week and in the preseason rankings. However, I'm going to have them dropping one spot here. They lost to a top 5 rated team. For me, no shocker there. But, so again, you lose to a top team in the league. You can't dock them too much for that. However, this season I have Super Bowl aspirations for this team, and they just didn't look the greatest in Week 2 there against the Kansas City Chiefs. So, again, they took care of business in Week 1. They did what they needed to do against the Indianapolis Colts. But I want to see that big win. I want to see that win that backs the statement I made before the season, that this team can win 13, 14 games this year with their division and maybe be the number 1 seed in the AFC. So Jacksonville, I move them down a spot here just because I want to see that big win before I really boost them up into the top 5 of my rankings. At number 6, we have the Baltimore Ravens. As a Browns fan, as much as it pains me to say, but an AFC North team did have to be in this top 10, and the Baltimore Ravens are that team, as they are 2-0. They, again, did what they needed to do Week 1 against a young rookie in C.J. Stroud. Week 2, though, they got a definite win there against the Cincinnati Bengals. A pretty good win, and they looked good, fair to say, on both sides of the ball. So shout out to the Ravens. I mean, year in and year out, they're kind of like the Bills and they're kind of like the Cowboys, where they're going to be a good regular season team, but they just don't, whether if it's health or coaching, they don't have enough to get them over the top come playoff time. Regardless, though, Todd Monken and this new offensive scheme is getting more and more comfortable by the week, and Lamar has shown a lot of promise, of course. It's good to see Mark Andrews back on the field always. The Ravens are at my number 6 spot. At number 5, we have a team that has jumped up 2 spots in my rankings. It's going to be the Dallas Cowboys, and you can argue, hey, they're a top 2 team in the league. Last week I had someone tell me that I lost all validation because I didn't have a 1-win Lions team as a top 5 team. Again, don't overreact early in the year. The Cowboys are at my number 7 spot last week. I'm jumping them up to my top 5. I want them to get another big-time win before I move them into my top 3. So again, I'm a little harsher with my rankings than other people, I'll say that. But the Cowboys have maybe looked like the best team in football with that historical defensive unit. At least that's what it looks like. Led by an offense that, of course, is going to be steady. They're going to score points with Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, who had a really good week, and, of course, Tony Pollard. But Jake Ferguson is a guy that a lot of people are sleeping on, and I really think he's going to be viewed as a top 10 tight end in the NFL after this season. At my number 4 spot, it's going to stay stagnant for maybe the next couple. But the Miami Dolphins, I was very close to moving them into my top 3. But the Miami Dolphins had, maybe not the greatest showing there against the Patriots. But in Week 1, of course, they had a very big-time win there against the Chargers. And in Week 2, they did win. They took care of business there on the road in Foxborough against the Patriots. But it was just super tough. I wanted to see another dominant game to put them in my top 3. But again, I'm a little harsher with my rankings. Dolphins, I'm super high on. I was early in the offseason. But for now, even though they're not at full strength with Jalen Ramsey out, I'm going to have them at number 4 with all the potential in the world to be a top 2 team. Moving over to number 3, it is going to be the Kansas City Chiefs. And again, how did you have them at number 3? They haven't looked the greatest this year. They're definitely on a Super Bowl hangover. Look, in Week 1, they lost to the Lions, and I knocked them down a spot as they were a top... Actually, I don't know. I think they were my number 3 team heading into the NFL season. They definitely were. So I have kept them at number 3 because in Week 1, they lost without their second and third best players. A lot was going against the Chiefs, and even with that said, in Week 1, they still could have won that game without their second and third best players. They only lost by a field goal or so there against the Detroit Lions, which everybody loves the Lions this year. And then in Week 2, they, I guess, have backed up the statement of why I had them as a top 3 team. They got their players back. They beat a top 6 team, in my opinion, there in the Jaguars. and they have solidified themselves. They're, again, a top 3 team, and they looked really, really good. The surprising thing about this Chiefs team compared to other years is that this defensive unit has looked better than the offensive unit so far in the season. Again, it's only 2 weeks. I'm not going to overreact. But with Chris Jones back on the field, that defense looked like a completely different unit. And no doubt, they're a top 3 team, in my opinion. Of course, it's 2 weeks in and going into week 3. Big game, I believe, there for Kansas City in week 3. The Philadelphia Eagles at my number 2 spot, they're going to stay stagnant. And you can really argue between number 1 and number 2. I'm not gonna go back and forth with you. If you want to say my number 1 team is number 2 or vice versa, I'm not gonna fight you. The Eagles for me were very, very close. You could even say 1B if you want to. They were very close to taking the number 1 spot in my rankings. The Eagles, they did what they needed to do. They looked a lot sharper this week here against the Minnesota Vikings. They really stopped them. They routed them for 2 years in a row. The game, of course, got close there at the end, but the Eagles did what they needed to do. They looked a lot better this week, and they're just the most complete team in football. No doubt it's going to take a big drop-off from them to leave the top 5. But as of right now, top 2 team in the league, and I really can't see them leaving the top 3 for the entire season. Moving over to the number 1 spot, though, it's going to stay stagnant. Again, not the most flashy, but I'm a little bit harsher with my things, so it's going to take a big drop-off or a really, really big win to move a team up or down here in the top 5. The San Francisco 49ers, after having that amazing week 1 game against the Steelers, come into week 2 and they took care of business against the Rams. So if you look on paper, they haven't had that really Super Bowl or that playoff level matchup yet, as the Rams and Steelers, in most people's eyes, aren't playoff teams. However, they've looked dominant on both sides of the ball. That defense looks like the best unit, or second best defensive unit in the NFL right now. In the offense, they've shown flashes. If Brandon Ayuk, he was on pace to have a really good game in week 2 as well, but he, of course, went down to injury. But Christian McCaffrey picked up the slack a lot there in week 1. This team just offensively, defensively, from a coaching side of things, they just have everything to get right back where they were last year, and hopefully this time they can stay healthy. But as of right now, my number 1 team, there's no reason to move them down in my rankings. Before we close off here with a segment, I do want to shout out today's sponsor, as Life by Laura reached out to me about a month ago. And of course, you've heard me talk about them each and every Tuesday, and it is maybe my favorite part of the show, as this is a company that reached out to me and said, hey, do you want a custom tumbler with your custom logo on it for the show? I said, yeah, send it out to me. So they sent it out to me, and I'm telling you, if you want to see what it looks like, go out to my Instagram at the Anomaly Podcast _ there. But it's such a high quality cup. It has my custom logo on it. And of course, when I do these recordings and I record for these shows each and every week, I need a cold beverage to my side to get through these shows, or I would lose my voice. This cup here keeps my drink cold for the entirety of the day, not only for the recording time. And I just couldn't be more grateful for a company like this to reach out to me and to give me a product that I use on a daily basis. You could put hot products, cold products, anything you need in this cup here, in this custom tumbler to get you through the day. But of course, Life by Laura does a lot more than custom tumblers. She does custom t-shirts, crafts. I know Halloween's right around the corner, and she has custom Halloween bags coming up. So check her out on Facebook at Life by Laura, or on Instagram at Life by Laura _ or Life by Laura 2023, excuse me. I'll have it linked down in the description to check out her past products or her past projects or new projects. I can't talk right now, but stick with me, as Life by Laura is doing a lot here. And if you can always shoot her a DM and say, hey, can we do this? I'm sure Life by Laura can make something happen for you. But again, her custom Halloween bags are coming up here in a couple weeks, so be on the lookout for her accounts there on Facebook and or Instagram. Again, Facebook, Life by Laura, Instagram, Life by Laura 2023 for everything custom crafts. But moving over here to finish off the show, I want to talk about these 0-2 teams. So we have a bunch of 0-2 teams here, as right now there are currently 8 NFL teams that are, I think 8 or 9 NFL teams that are currently 0-2, and not that every one of these teams is set for a Super Bowl this year, or that is their goal this year. At the end of the day, as a football team, that is the ultimate goal, is to win a Super Bowl. And only 3 teams in the history of the NFL, and in the history of the Super Bowl era, I'll say, have started off 0-2 and went on to win the entire Super Bowl. That is the 1993 Cowboys, of course, after Emmitt Smith ended his hiatus. The 2001 Patriots, as in Week 3, of course, we know, the greatest of all time, Tom Brady, took over as the quarterback and led them to the Super Bowl. And then in 2007, it's kind of like the We Believe Warriors, but in this version is the New York Giants. They went on to take down the undefeated Patriots in the Super Bowl. So 3 teams that all had either returns to the football field or just a magical run. 3 teams have started off 0-2 and went on to win the Super Bowl. So very unlikely in the 58 Super Bowls that we've had, but it is a possibility. I guess you're telling me there's a chance, right? But let's look at the teams in the AFC that are 0-2. We have the Cincinnati Bengals, the Houston Texans, the New England Patriots, the Chargers, and the Denver Broncos. When we look at these teams and we think about who has Super Bowl aspirations this year, I think I'm definitely most confident in Cincinnati, as they've always started off rough in the first half of the year, the first month of the year, at least in the Joe Burrow era. I saw a stat earlier this morning that Joe Burrow in his career is 1-7 in the first month of the year. But then in the latter half, everything outside of that, he's like, he almost has doubled the amount of wins than losses. So Joe Burrow, they're used to slow starts. I have no doubt that they can turn this around, as at the end of the day, they were my Super Bowl favorites, and as you saw, they weren't in my top 10 anymore. I'm most worried about the Chargers, though, I will say that, out of the AFC teams, as their defense is that bad. What doesn't make sense about the Chargers is that they have the star power throughout their defense. Led by Derwin James, you have Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, you have Asante Samuel Jr. on the outside on the corner as a cornerback. You have J.C. Jackson, who's a big guy that they signed last year. This is a Chargers defense that has the pieces all around, and whether if it's just coaching or underperforming, it seems like they can never get it all right at the same time. And that defense is that bad where I had them as a 12-5 team before the season. I really thought this was a year that they could be kind of, break the mold, but they're right back in the mold. This Chargers team doesn't look any different, and I have them here. I think I'm the most worried about them as far as Super Bowl aspirations in the AFC side of things. On the NFC side of things, we have Minnesota, we have the Chicago Bears, the Arizona Cardinals, and the Carolina Panthers, depending on who you ask. Of course, the Cardinals and the Panthers, in most people's eyes, are not contenders this year. In my eyes, I would say Minnesota or Chicago aren't either. However, again, if you ask a Vikings fan or a Bears fan, they might want to bicker with you, go back and forth, and say Justin Fields could get it done or Kirk Cousins can get it done. Regardless, if I narrow it down to the Vikings and the Bears, I'm most confident in Minnesota to turn it around to at least make the playoffs. I'm going to narrow it down to just making the playoffs more so than the Super Bowl aspirations. The Vikings, I'm most confident they can turn it around to do that. The Bears, I mean, they might look like the worst team in football right now, aside from some other teams, but they might be the worst team in football, at least with how they've looked, and it all starts with their quarterback, and their quarterback has not looked the greatest, and given all the hype that this team had, they're definitely underperforming, so I'm worried about the Bears more so than the Vikings about making the playoffs and maybe winning this division. But that is going to do it for today's episode, as hopefully you enjoyed, as, again, what is it, like episode 96, as 97 is coming up here, or it's 97, excuse me. 98 is coming up this Thursday, and of course, next Thursday, not this Thursday, but next, we have episode 100. So the 100th podcast here on the channel, as we have, 550 plus subs, on the road to 1,000. The goal of this channel in the first year was to hit 500 subs on the channel. We've passed that, and we're on the road to 1,000. So you guys have already passed my year one goal, so thank you for all the support to this point. But if you're still here and you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so, as you enjoy at least a little bit. So go ahead down below and subscribe to the channel, as we're on the road to that next big milestone. But without further ado, we'll be back tomorrow on Wednesday with our Week 3 waiver wire pickups for fantasy football if you're a fantasy player. And then Thursday, we have a special guest coming on for our Week 3 predictions of the NFL season, of course. And Friday, some more fantasy content on the way. So 4 videos a week, every single week, at 1 o'clock p.m. basically. But until tomorrow, stay happy, stay healthy, and drop any comments down below. Until then, I'm out.